Hello, hello, friends, and welcome. I am really excited to be here today. We're just fiddling with some audio things, but welcome. My name's Andrea. I make dice here on the channel and sometimes stream a variety of games. It's been quite a while since I've streamed because our old internet provider was absolutely terrible and I couldn't run a stream at all basically without skipping and lag, and that just got really frustrating. But we did recently just switch our internet providers, and this is kind of like a little test stream before I try and get back to streaming The Sims and Spyro, which was the last two games that I was in the process of streaming. And I'm just really excited to be back. And I thought, what better way to come back than with a dice pouring stream? Today we're going to be pouring 3 different designs. I'll kind of walk through the process, answer any questions that anyone in the chat has. So if you're here and you're curious about making dice or you have any questions, please let me know. I love talking about my process. I think one of the really great things about the dice making community is that it is a really collaborative community. I've learned so much from other makers, and I love sharing some of my favorite things with new makers, old makers, because I think we all have something special that we bring to the table. So today we're going to be making 3 designs. The first one we're doing is my Anastasia dice. I had several requests to bring this back because they are currently out of stock in the shop. So we're going to be pouring that today. I'm also going to be attempting to recreate a sea glass design that I made purely by accident. I don't remember exactly what I put in those dice, so we're going to check that out today and see if I can recreate that. And then I had someone suggest that I just take all of my glitters in the same color family and just throw them all into some dice together. So we're going to do that, and we're going to attempt to make some like blue ocean galaxy dice. I don't really know what I'm going for with that, but I have a ton of chromatic castle glitters that I'm just going to throw in, and I'll kind of show you all of that as well. So the Anastasia dice are a process to prep. So I have these sheets of blue foil, and essentially the first step to making these dice is taking little bits of this foil and pressing it into my molds to kind of brush it in and get it looking kind of flaky on the surface. I have molds. They're made by Hands by Mari on Hands of Mari, Hands by Mari. They're made by another maker in the community who does an amazing job because I hate making molds and I don't have the time for it. So these were silicone molds that are made out of my masters. This one you can kind of see in the D20 has my logo on it, and then this one has my logo in the D6. And so this is also the shard D4 version. I have a shard D4 and a crystal D4 that I use. I'll show you the crystal D4 molds later. And then I have a D2 mold here and a couple of D20s. So I'm going to just get started brushing this foil in. This is probably the most time-consuming thing we're going to do for any of our dice designs today. So I just kind of press this into the dice and then use this really old, this had a bunch of glitter in it. Well, this D2 is going to be very glittery, but I just take this really old paintbrush and brush the foil into the mold so it kind of starts flaking up a little bit, which is the look I'm going for. I'm going to try and get this glitter out of this paintbrush. I used this to make my Gatsby dice, and I forgot to clean it apparently, so it's got a bunch of glitter in it. But yeah, this is just a really old paintbrush. These will destroy paintbrushes. You can see the bristles are kind of all over the place. So this is definitely not like a nice thing to do to your paintbrushes. I would not use a really expensive paintbrush to do this. These are just like cheap ones that I got in a big pack at the craft store. I got like 6 of them for like $8. And you will also just get this foil all over your molds. So I recommend making sure you're having packing tape if you're going to do something like this, so that you can clean your molds up afterwards. Like this, I dropped the foil here and it just got everywhere, which will happen because of like static cling. But you can kind of see I've just brushed some of this blue foil into the mold, and we're going to do that for every single die in these molds. So this is just it's a very time-consuming process, but I really like the look that this gives, because this is a two-toned foil design. So I use this blue foil, which I press into the dice, and then I use, oh god, I'm getting foil everywhere. I use like a champagne gold foil in the resin, so the champagne foil kind of is suspended, and then this blue foil looks very different because it's been pressed onto the surface of the die. And I just like the effect that gives when you have the two different colors of foil in the same design. They kind of get different textures. You can kind of see here, we're starting like one of the dice sets. I start with the D6. It's the easiest one to get the foil into. And all I'm doing is I'm just kind of like ripping off little bits of this. Sometimes I use the paintbrush to try and get it in. Sometimes I'll use the back of the paintbrush, and it sticks quite easily, and then I just kind of run the brush over it to press it in and also break it up a little bit so that it looks nice and textured. I want that texture on the surface of the die, because then when you pour the resin in, it'll kind of keep that all in place, and I think it just looks really cool. And there's not like a rhyme or reason to how much foil any particular die gets. I kind of just do it until I'm happy with how they look. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing for now, and then we'll get into some resin, safety, and mixing, all of those things. So while we're working on this, just a couple of quick stream and like life updates. Like I said, I haven't been streaming because my internet was garbage, but we have changed internet providers. Unfortunately, that means we had to go back to Comcast, but the internet has been a lot better. It's a lot more stable. I'm not currently hooked up to an Ethernet cable, and I'm not having any like frame rate issues or anything right now, which is great. I couldn't do that on our old internet, and so I'm hoping that means I can get back into some gaming streams soon. I was streaming pretty regularly. I mean, sort of regularly. I'm really bad at schedules, but I was streaming a Sims 4 Legacy Challenge, so that will be starting back up soon. I think we're in Generation 3 of that save, which I'm really excited about. And then I'm also playing Spyro 2, and we're trying to 120% that game. If you aren't familiar with that game, basically there's a bunch of like bonus content that enables you to get more than 100% completion, and so we're going to try and do all of that as well to get to the 120%. Spyro is one of my like absolute favorite games as a child, and so it's been really fun revisiting that. So both of those things will be returning to the channel. I don't have like an exact schedule for that yet, but hoping to at least do one more stream this week. I'm on break this week from school. I teach middle school ELA, and so we're on Thanksgiving break right now, which is why I'm streaming on a weekday at 9 in the morning. Normally my streams are on the weekends in the morning, or they're in the evening during the week, just because of my work schedule. So if you're interested in more like dice making streams, or any of those video game streams sound interesting, I'd love to have you stick around. And honestly, the best way to get updates on that is to like follow this so you get notified when I go live, because like I said, I am pretty inconsistent at doing that. Or following me on Twitter. I'm trying to be better about posting when I start streaming, because that's like a thing that is helpful. So we're trying to do that. So those are both really good places to get updates about future streams. So I have one of the dice molds kind of prepped here. Again, it's very messy. This is not a clean dice design by any means, but I just kind of look to see, like I'm looking right now, the D12 looks like it could use a little more, so I'm just going to put a little more foil in there, and then we'll do this other mold, and then we'll be ready to mix up some resin. But this one's looking pretty good. I'm really happy about this, so I'm going to go ahead and do the other mold, and then we'll get into the actual pouring of the dice, which is exciting. But yeah, so like I said, you might be able to see, you might not, but the foil is very clingy. There's a lot of like static electricity going on, so I've honestly found that it's kind of helpful to use the back end of the brush here to get the foil on, and then to use that to press it into the mold before breaking it up with the regular end of the brush. That's kind of the easiest way I found to do this. Otherwise it just kind of breaks all over your fingers and gets all over the mold. This will come up pretty easily with some packing tape if it doesn't come up with the resin excess that ends up on the top of the mold anyway. You can just kind of take some packing tape to it. So it's not going to like permanently damage your molds if that's a concern. I have never like had resin or have had this foil like fused to my molds. It's always come off. So if that is a concern that you are worried about, know that that's generally not an issue. Obviously, like sometimes freak things happen with resin that are unexpected, and you just kind of have to roll with the punches a little bit. But for the most part, if it doesn't pull off with the excess resin when you remove the dice from the molds, I've gotten it all off with packing tape fairly easily, which is good. And again, there's not like rhyme or reason to where I put this in there. Honestly, it's kind of wherever it sticks, because it is so clingy with the static electricity and whatnot. But I try and just put like 2 or 3 relatively decent sized chunks of foil in each one, and then once I've done that, I'll just kind of take a step back and look and see if anything seems particularly empty in regards to the blue, because you don't want a lot of this. And I've done with this with other colors too, and color combinations. You can do this with any foil color. It does just work best with the like foil sheet, since they break up pretty easily without a lot of effort. And you want that like brushed kind of texture where it's starting to look crumbly, but it is still like sticking to the surface. Because there are some other forms of foil, and I've just found that this one is the best one for this particular style. I have other types of foil that I'll use for other designs. So it kind of just depends on what you're going for. Sometimes you end up with too much foil in one spot, and you kind of just use the brush a little more aggressively. You don't want to be too aggressive because you don't want to tear up your molds, but if you kind of like use a little bit of force, you can generally move it around. So here's the other mold. I'm feeling pretty happy with the foiling on this. So I think I'm going to set the brush aside. Again, this tears up your brushes. Please use cheap brushes. If you're going to do this, don't use your like really expensive ones that you would use for painting, because you will ruin them and you will be upset about it. So now that this is done, I'm going to go ahead and get like gloves and my respirator. I've got a window open in this room. There's a fan running to kind of get all the fumes out of the house. Because resin fumes are toxic. You don't want those around. It's not good. And then you want nitrile gloves to get the resin off of your skin, because resin can be a skin irritant. you can have like allergic reactions to it, and we don't want any of that. So I am going to grab all of that, get suited up, and then we will start mixing our resin for this first pour. I am using Paduo today. This is a 2-part epoxy resin, so it's a 1-to-1, part A and part B. So you just kind of pour it out. I use these reusable silicone measuring cups, and I usually use about 80 milliliters of resin to do the 2 full sets and some singles. I like having a little bit of extra in case something gets knocked over or spilled a little bit. And I have some dump molds and jewelry molds and things that I use for any extra resin so that it is being used in some way and not just getting thrown out. Which is why I started making jewelry. So if you are curious about like what I do with the extra resin, sometimes I'll make bookmarks. I have a TikTok toe mold that I just kind of fill with extra resin. And I do have jewelry molds as well. So I do use any of the extra resin to make earrings, which I list in my shop for pretty cheap since it's just like leftover resin that I'll kind of clean up a little bit. So we're going to start mixing this up. With 2-part resin, you want to make sure you're mixing it super, super well for at least 2 to 3 minutes. So we're going to be here for a little bit, getting an arm workout in, all of those good things. And once this is mixed up, we'll put it in a separate cup and we'll add some colorants to it, and we'll add the champagne foil, which is the second foil color that I use for this design. I really like the 2-tone foil for this design. I'm a huge Anastasia fan. It was my favorite movie as a kid. I would check it out from the video store at least once a month as a kid. Obsessed with the musical. It's like one of my absolute favorite movies. And so when I was thinking about what I wanted for this design, I was really inspired by the colors of the jewelry box, the like gold and the blue. And so that's kind of what I was pulling from. And so I wanted something that felt a little wintry. I wanted something that felt regal. So we have the blue foil to kind of represent some of that blue enamel. And then the champagne foil adds a really nice contrast to that from within the dice. So we're going to give this a mix for like another minute or so. I use a pressure pot, so I'm not worried about the bubbles. I know you can kind of start seeing bubbles popping up in the resin. Normally you want to reduce as many bubbles as possible. Those cause balance issues. Those can cause voids in the faces of your dice. We don't want those. But I do use a pressure pot, so I kind of just whip this resin. I'm not super careful when I mix it because I know I'm going to get these out when I put them in the pressure pot, which is basically just a big metal pot that I fill with compressed air until it reaches a certain amount of PSI to compress the air bubbles out of the dice. I used to make dice without a pressure pot, and that was a journey. You have to like be super careful and heat the resin and stir really slowly, and it's like a whole thing. There are makers who make beautiful dice without a pressure pot, and I commend them greatly. I don't have the patience for that. So I am not careful when I'm mixing this. I'm just kind of whipping it. It's very bubbly, but we're going to get all of that out, and it's going to be fine. I also use Paduo for most designs because it's a thinner resin. You can kind of see here it's very stringy, it's very thin, which I like because that also helps get bubbles out a little bit easier, and especially with inclusions like florals and cellophane, which we're going to be using later. So this is just clear currently, and what I'm going to do, I have some champagne foil. This is another sheet of that like really breakable foil, so I just take some of this. I'll kind of break it a little bit with a popsicle stick. Ooh, I'm gonna drop it off camera. It's very sticky, obviously. I'm just gonna get that off of my glove, hopefully, and into our cup. I only have about half of my resin in here, so I'm going to put some more of that in when we put the other half in. I just have smaller cups, and if you fill it too much, it makes a big mess when you pour it. So we're going to do that, and then I also have this silver mica here. I just use a little bit of this for a little bit of sparkle, and we're going to mix this really well. And then you can see as I'm mixing this, that foil sheet breaks down into smaller pieces so that it looks nicer when you pour it into a die. All right. So we're gonna give this a good mix just to break up that foil, mix that glitter in really nicely. And then for this design, something else I do, if you've looked at the picture I posted on Twitter, yes, so when you put the two parts together, that is when the chemical reactions start, and you have a specific amount of time before it starts to like thicken up and gel. And so for this resin, it has about a 40-minute working life before it starts thickening up. Different conditions can change that. If it's really cold, that extends the working time. It also makes it less likely that the resin will properly harden. If it's really warm or you mix a lot of resin at once, you could get flash curing, which is when the resin just like overheats and it cures super, super quickly. I have never had resin flash cure, but I know a lot of people who live in warmer places have that happen a lot over the summer when it gets really hot. I don't normally have that issue though, which is nice, because it sounds like a nightmare. I can only imagine like going to pour your dice and then suddenly your resin is like an ice cube. Well, not an ice cube, but like it's basically like very hard. It's kind of like flexible plastic. It doesn't sound very fun. It sounds very stressful. So I'm glad I haven't really had that issue. But yeah, so this, after about 40 minutes, it's very like gel-like. It's almost like honey consistency. And then I would say that's when it definitely gets harder to pour with it. And then sometimes I will wait for it to reach that consistency if I'm working with like heavier glitter that I want to make sure it gets suspended properly. Because since I do use a thinner resin, heavier glitter likes to sink to the bottom, so you kind of have to wait for it to gel up a little bit, which is annoying. But you know, pros and cons. There are pros and cons to all types of resins. I know some people use resins that have a longer pot life or working time because they do a lot more complex pours. Some people who want just the resin to cure a lot faster will use resin that has a shorter pot life, which if you're not doing anything really complicated is fine. I've just found that for most of my designs, like a 40 to 60 minute pot life or working time is kind of ideal. Gives me enough time to like pour 2 or 3 things at once. I don't have to really worry about it. So I did pour this first set here. Basically for this design, I take this white ink and I want the ink to kind of swirl up from the top face. So I just drop some ink in here and then pour the resin on top of the ink, and that causes some really interesting movement and swirls and all that good stuff. Since the ink is liquid, it will kind of move throughout the resin without mixing in all the way. I think it just looks really cool. So that's what we do for this design here. I was kind of going for like a snowstorm effect when coming up with this design, and I found that that was kind of the best way to achieve what I was going for. So you can kind of see here on the D20 there's some white ink kind of bubbling up along the surface, and that is ink that has traveled from the bottom of the mold up to the top of the dice. and it will just kind of not fully mix in with the resin, but it kind of creates some nice like smoky wisp effects along the outer edges of the die, and it looks really cool. So these are finished. They are ready to go in the caddy. The last thing I do before I put the lids on is just really quickly run a heater or a heat source, usually a lighter, over the top to pop any initial surface bubbles, to try and just make sure we're not trapping any really large bubbles under the lids, because those don't really go anywhere. And then we just put the lids on. And we reset our space for our next die. So I have lids. These ones have like colored markings on them so that you can line up the holes pretty easily. And they just kind of stack on there like so. And we'll move these off to the caddy while we're working on our other designs. I think next we'll do the Whoops all glitter design. And then we'll do the dirty pour last, because that's kind of the easiest one. That one I'm more just trying to get colors right, because I made dice and I didn't write down what I put in them, so I don't remember how I got the color I did. So we're experimenting with that today, and hopefully we got the right color combination. Alright, so I'm going to get set up for our next set here. I am going to switch gloves for this one because I have foil all over my gloves because it sticks to everything. But we're going to make some space dice next. I have two different sets of masters, and this is like a chunkier mold because the dice are a little bit larger. And this one has a slightly different logo on it. So this one just has the full sunflower motif. And then it also has a different font. This is more of like a spacey font. The molds are the same. They're just different colors so that you can match lids easily to them, which is another strategy. And then for this one, we are going to be using this cellophane to get some like refraction of color. And then I have so many different glitters here. These are all kind of like blue and purple color shifting glitters, and we are going to just throw everything into these dice and see what happens, because why not? So for this cellophane, I like to just kind of rip it into some chunky pieces. I find that the jagged edges and the more organic shapes translate better inside of dice, and often I'm like doing these while I'm wearing gloves that have resin on them, so I don't want to get resin all over my scissors. So often I just tear these. So I'm going to tear a bunch of these pieces up, and then we'll kind of crinkle them and shove them into the dice before starting to mix up. We'll do some clear, and we'll layer the clear with, I think, some blue resin for these. So all I'm doing here is I'm just kind of crinkling this into a little ball, which creates some nice different shape and color here. So you can see that this has like a blue-green color shift. You can get a bunch of different kinds of cellophane that have different color shifts to do different things depending on like the vibes that you're going for. This is just what I have on hand right now. So we're gonna try and make some like ocean-y galaxy dice. Since I have a bunch of blue and purple color shift, I thought that would be a fun vibe to go for. And I'm also gonna try and get some like smoke wisps in here so I can show y'all how that works. So again, just crinkling, and then I just use the tweezers to kind of shove this into the larger part of the die. I think I want a bigger piece in the D20, so maybe I'll use this smaller piece on the coin here. The coins are really hard to use these in because they're not very deep, so you kind of just have to manipulate them several times once you get resin in there so that the resin gets underneath the more flat piece. Otherwise, you don't end up with a D2 coin. You end up with something that has a giant hole in it, which we don't want. So we're going to try not to get a giant hole today. It's been really nice, like, getting to pour dice more often. During the school year, I try not to pour dice on the weekdays because I do have to run an air compressor to fill up my pressure pot, which is kind of loud, and so I don't like to run that after like noon to 2 o'clock because I don't want to be like too obnoxious for the downstairs neighbors. So during the school year, I really only pour dice on like weekends or days off, and since I have all week off, I've been able to make a lot more dice than I normally can, which has been really fun. Instead of like only being able to pour like once or twice on the weekend, depending on what I'm doing, it's been nice to be able to pour more often. So I'm hoping to have some sort of like smaller shop update in December. I wasn't originally going to have a shop update in December, but I'm making a lot of dice, so we probably will. Okay, so this is set up. So I have a few things. These are all from Chromatic Castle, which is probably one of my favorite glitter supply places. So we have some that are like just really thin, small pieces that just make a really nice color shift. And then we have some like chunkier pieces. So I'm kind of just gonna mix all of this together in some resin. We're gonna start with some clear resin and just some sparkle just to try and get some resin under the cellophane, and then we'll kind of go from there. I'm going with a blue. I have this Monsoon color that I think is going to be really pretty from Ranger Inks. I think we're going to use that, and then I'll show a fun technique to get like smoke wisps into some dice using a toothpick, so we'll do that. For this dice set, I don't know what these are going to turn out like. I've never used all of these things together before, but someone suggested just throwing all of my glitters into a cup together. This is not all of my glitter by any means, because I have more glitter than one human could ever reasonably need, but it is a good chunk of the glitter. So again, we're gonna pour out some part A, some part B. We'll mix it together. I'm going to start with a clear base for these just because I find that that helps. When you're trying to do like galaxy stuff and color shift stuff, I find that it's helpful to have a mix of clear and colored resin. So we're going to start with some clear. I'll probably put some glitter, maybe some color shift in it, and then we'll mix up the color as well. We'll see what happens. These are definitely bigger molds. I probably didn't need this much resin, but since we're using a couple of different colors, sometimes you lose resin in the transfer process, so I just do the 80. It's a really easy number to pour. And like I said, I make like earrings and other things with the excess resin, so nothing is going to waste. Sometimes at the end of a pour, if I have a bunch of resin left over, I just mix it all together and pour it into a dice mold and see what happens. So we might do that today depending on what we have left. And then I don't really do demoldings here on Twitch because they don't take that long. So if you're interested in seeing what these dice turn out like, I'll usually post some like sneak peeks the night that I pour, and so that'll probably go up in about 12 hours on my Instagram tonight or tomorrow, depending on when I pull these. This resin, it is a 24-hour to full set, but it's usually hard enough at about 12 hours that I can start pulling them so that I can get the flashing off a little bit easier. So depending on like weather, obviously if it's colder, it takes longer to cure. So I usually check some of the excess resin at about 12 hours to see if it's hard enough to pull, and if it is, I like to pull it the night that I pour so that there's less chance that I chip the dice trying to get the flashing off. Flashing is just the super thin bits of resin that kind of So around the top of the mold, when you put the lid on, it just kind of smooshes everything out. And you want excess resin in there because that's what fills voids that come from bubbles when you compress the air out. But it just does leave some flashing, and I found if the resin is too hard that I'm more likely to chip a die. So I'll probably pull these tonight. It is kind of on the edge of being warm enough for this resin, so might not be able to pull tonight. I guess we'll see. And mix this for another like minute or so, and then we'll start playing with color and glitter, which is always fun. I know it is a holiday week. We're not doing anything too crazy for Thanksgiving. There's just the two of us, and so it never made sense to like make a giant meal for the holiday if it's just the two of us. So we are just kind of going to cook some food here. Nothing too crazy. Maybe watch a movie. I already decorated for Christmas, so I don't have to do that because I love Christmas decorations, and I put mine up on the 1st of November. Just because I felt like it. So I don't really have Christmas stuff to put up, and we're not really doing a ton of Black Friday shopping this year, so it's going to be a really chill holiday, which will be nice. It's been a really busy school year. This year is unlike any year that I have taught. This is my 7th year teaching, and I thought Zoom teaching was hard, and this year has definitely been harder in some ways. And I know a lot of teachers are feeling similarly, so if you have any teacher friends in your life, just send them some love. This year is really hard, and we're all just kind of trying to adapt to all of the new things that we have to do. Kids are trying to get used to all the new things. It's a really weird year, so definitely send your teacher friends some love and appreciation. I know they would appreciate it, just because this year has been really hard. So right now all we're doing is I'm just putting like a really thin layer of this clear in. I want to start soaking the cellophane a little bit because cellophane likes to trap air bubbles, and air bubbles are the enemy of dice makers. We don't want those, so we're just kind of starting to fill the base of the dice with the clear. I don't want a lot of clear in here. I want to get some color in here. So we're just kind of filling the base, and then we'll mix up our colors and our glitters, which I'm really excited about. And as you're pouring it, like your cellophane might move around, you can always just like poke at it with some tweezers, popsicle stick, your fingers, whatever you feel like. To kind of reshape, readjust, reposition, all of those good things. Beautiful. So I think I'm going to leave this clear in case I want some more clear. We are going to start draining this, and while that's working, I'm going to put in some smoke wisps. And to do that, I'm just going to put a little bit of resin on my work surface here. I find that putting a little bit of resin helps the ink kind of stick on the popsicle stick. And I'm just going to put some drops of white ink also on my work surface and kind of mix that together, because I want to get some like white smoky bits in here. So now that I've got some white resin ink on my toothpick, I'm just going to kind of stab that into the clear resin that we've put in the dice. And some of the white ink will transfer from the toothpick into the resin that's in our molds. And when we add more to that, it'll kind of thin that concentrated ink out and create some really nice kind of smoky effects. So we're just going to do this a few times. I need a little bit more ink, so you can always just add more ink to your work surface. You could also just dip the toothpick directly into the ink if you don't have resin on it, but I find that a lot harder to do because you're going to get resin on your toothpick and you don't want to put resin in your ink bottle. So I just kind of drop it on my work surface a little bit, swirl it around, because dice making is messy, and that's fine. We embrace the mess. The mess leads to cool things most of the time. So I'm just making sure that every die gets a couple of white ink swirls. I might need to do one more round of white ink on my work surface here. The trick is, if you're going to continue using the same work surface, to remember that you have a puddle of resiny ink on there and not stick your arm in it, which I have done before and it's not fun. I don't recommend doing that. So I'm probably just gonna stick a little bit of paper towel in that spot so I don't make a mess on myself. All right. So now that it's done, I'm just kind of looking around. If anything seems like I'm not seeing a ton of white, I might just go in and stick a little bit more in. And this will like thin out and feather out when we put the rest of the resin in. So if it's looking very heavy right now, that's okay. We are going to be editing it, essentially. So now is the fun part. I'm going to start with, here we go, a couple of drops of this Monsoon ink, which is just like a really pretty kind of like navy-ish blue color. You can kind of see it here. I'm going to mix this all together in a moment, but for now, we're going to just go in and put a bunch of different glitters in here. I'm not really gonna like measure anything out. We're just gonna tap a little bit of each glitter into here because why not? And then I'll mix it up. And then we'll take a look at what we've got. Again, these are all from Chromatic Castle. And these are all of my like blue and purple and green ones. I have other ones that I'm not going to be using today because they didn't really fit the color scheme that I'm working with. But they have a ton of beautiful products. This one is this one that needs to come open. There we go. So I'm just going to tap a little bit of each of these in here, and then we'll mix it up, and we'll see what happens. We did this one already. Which ones am I missing? We did Wisteria. Oh, or no. That's Grindalo. Let's do some Wisteria. And then I think I might grab some of that blue foil that I had before for the Anastasia set as well. I don't have a lot left of that sheet, so it could be fun to just put that in here. If I can find where I set that off to the side. Okay, maybe we won't put that foil in. Let's mix this up for now and see what we're working with. It's not dark enough. I'm gonna put a little bit more ink in. Just because I want like a nice rich color. And then you can kind of see in here, there's a bunch of different colors. We've got glitters. It's definitely an interesting combination. I think it'll look cool. I want I think I want to put a little more of the like chunkier glitter in, and a little bit more of this blue color shift, and then I think it'll be good. Yeah, this is definitely looking very interesting. I'm excited to see how this will all play together with the cellophane as well. I think it'll be really pretty. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna pour this nice and high into each of the molds. And I wanna try and leave a little bit of room to make this even darker and inject a little bit of a dark core into the very center. So I'm going to try not to fill this up entirely because I want to add another, like a deeper color to it. And we're going to do that with a syringe to really get that into the die and not just on the top. And we also want to leave some room for this to settle into the cellophane. Again, that's going to trap air, and so you want to give it a little bit of time to kind of burp itself or breathe and release some of that gas that gets caught up in there. Okay, this is looking really good. So then the last step for this, I'm going to put some more of this clear we have left over from earlier in here. And I'm going to use some of this chameleon pigment. It is like a black blue color shift. It's super pretty. We're going to put some of this, like a good healthy chunk of that in here. And since I have this out, we're going to move some of this out of the way to give us just a little more space. And when we mix this in, it's going to be a really nice dark black with a blue color shift to it. And that's what we're going to insert into the middle of our dice. So I'm going to use a syringe to do this. It gives us a lot of control with what we're adding and where we're putting it. You could also use pipettes. I have used pipettes for this kind of technique successfully in the past, so you can definitely do it that way. This, I think, just reduces the amount of air that you're risking adding into your dice, which is good. We want to minimize air. So I'm just going to go through with the black. The D20 in this mold is probably going to get a little bit of clear because I don't want to do a second dose of this black because it's really dark, but we didn't quite fill the mold all the way, which is why we hold on to some of the clear resin, because then we can just kind of mix that in on the top. But these are looking cool. I'm excited to see. For this, I just want to kind of mix the black in, since it's a bigger surface area to cover. We might put some more clear in there as well. And this black is really cool, so I'm kind of hoping we have some left over. I think these would make some really pretty earrings. So I'm hoping we have a little bit. We should have some of this left over. As we just continue to fill our dice molds with this like black center bit. So this, oh dear, oops. Sometimes you pull your syringe out too far. But luckily it just goes right back in. This will be really fun. I think it's got an interesting combination of colors. It's got the blue, it's got the clear, it's got 7 different kinds of glitter in it, plus the cellophane. So I'm definitely curious to see how this one turns out. Speaking of cellophane, I'm just kind of going to tap the cellophane down a little bit so we can top it off with a little bit more of this clear. And you can definitely start to see, like, there's a really big air bubble here, and we definitely want to pop those because we might need to put more resin in these. And when you use a big inclusion like the cellophane, you're more likely to get those really large bubbles coming to the surface because that cellophane traps and then slowly releases that air. So I also just kind of squeeze the molds a little bit to try and release any more of that we can. And looking here, I want to add a little bit more clear to probably this D6. Because I don't want to do a second round of the black. I think that's going to be too much, and it's going to be too dark. I don't want it to overtake the whole design. So anything that looks like it might need a little more, I'm going to top off with the clear. You want like a nice little bit of a pool of resin around each of the openings. And these are looking really good now. It's got some really nice depth to them. I'm seeing some of the areas look almost green. Again, the cellophane floats, so I'm just kind of going to make sure that it's in a position so that when we put the lids on, the cellophane will get tapped down, so it's not poking out of the top. And we will put these lids on and get ready to move on to our last design, which will be a dirty pour, which is a different technique than these other ones that we've just done. And again, these are all just going off to the side on a caddy that I have, and then the caddy will get put into my pressure pot after the stream so that we can compress all the air out of it. Okay. We have this, so my Anastasia resin is starting to get really thick. I'm going to go ahead and just put that in my dump mold since it's like a nice clear color, but it wouldn't look very good as an earring since it's just clear. So we'll go ahead and just dump that out before it gets too thick and it becomes unusable. I am currently filling a tic-tac-toe board with my excess resin so that I might do like a giveaway or something for it once it's full. But basically, anytime I have leftover resin, I just dump it into this tic-tac-toe mold. I've made some like X's and O's as well. To go with it, and it's really cute. It's very colorful. It's been fun to see the different like layers of color over time, and I'm excited to pop this out of the mold once it's finally full, which it's really close. It's definitely very close to full. I've just been using the resin to make like the earrings and stuff as well, so it's not filling up as quickly as I had originally anticipated that it would, which is fine. I think the earrings have been really fun to make, but this is looking very close to full, so I might actually be able to take this out of the mold in the next couple of days, so that's exciting. Alright, we have one final design. I am going to switch out this work surface with a new one. We get HelloFresh, and the like kind of coated paper makes for a really good work surface, so I just use these and then I toss them. So they are kind of getting recycled before they get thrown away, which is good. Because resin is not the most environmentally friendly hobby in the world, and I recognize that, so I do try and find ways to reduce waste however I can. So I use, I recycle my like work papers, I'll use the like silicone mixing cups, and then making sure I use every last bit of resin that I pour, so I'm not just like throwing that in the trash. I do have a little bit of this black resin left. I'm going to dump this into my earring mold really quickly, and then we'll get set up for our last pour. Alrighty, friends. It is time to try and recreate dice set that I don't remember how I made. So that should be fun. I think in October made a set of sea glass dice. They were this super pretty, like soft bluish green dirty pour, and I know it had white and I know it had clear with gold alcohol ink in it, but I don't remember how I got the blue color. So I'm going to test something out today that is kind of like my best guess at how I got the blue color. I think it'll be really pretty even if it's not how I got the blue color. But we're kind of I'm using this as a starting point as I try and experiment to figure out how I made it. Because I've had some people request that it come back to the shop, and I'm like, of course, the one I don't remember how I made. That's the one people love, and I'm glad that people love it. It's super pretty. I think I have one piece in shop left. I think I have one of my D4 necklaces that were made with bits and bobs from the last pour. So if you're curious, you can definitely find the set on my Instagram feed, but I also have a D4 necklace in shop of this style. So yeah, we're going to try and make that today. It's very pretty. It's like a soft bluish green that I don't remember how I got. So we're going to experiment and do a pour today. So this is similarly to my last one. This has my shop logo as the logo, and then this is the crystal D4. So it's more of like an elongated D6 with triangles on the end. So it's more of like a barrel kind of feel. These are honestly my favorite D4 shapes to roll. I think the shard D4 is very pretty. It looks very great in photos. It's fun to make jewelry out of, but I think for dice sets, I think the crystal D4 is actually my favorite. And so certain designs I'll use one or the other for, depending on what I think will look better. If I'm trying to get something that has a lot of refraction in it, a lot of angles, I tend to use the shard D4. And then if I'm using like flowers or something like that, I'll use the crystal just because there's more space in it. So it really depends. I like them both. There are mixed opinions on the alternate D4 shapes. If you have a favorite D4 shape, I'd love to know. I've done polls and it's been a pretty even split on the two. The consensus is just we don't like the original, which is fine and fair because the original one sucks to sand and polish and ink anyway. So, oh, dear, I bumped my stand. One moment, please. There we go. Yeah, the original shape kind of sucks to stand anyway, the like pyramid. So I have converted to a different shape. I use both. There are other shapes as well. Yeah, the original can be used as a caltrop. I don't think it rolls very well. And they also are just like a pain to like sand and to ink. So I think for like the handmade sets, I think something special about them is that they can be different than the factory made. And so I have converted to not pouring caltrop D4s. Mostly because I don't like finishing them, and in the handmade market, they're like the least popular D4 shape. I do have a caltrop D4 master. They're just not currently active in any of my molds. If someone was like trying to get a commission and really, really wanted a caltrop D4, I could make a mold for it. I just don't personally like finishing them, so I stopped using them. I know it's like the classic. I was very against the alternate D4s for a really long time because I was like, no, like the classic shapes are classic for a reason. But they kind of just suck to use. So I don't use them anymore. Yeah, so for this design, we're doing a dirty pour, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that is in just a second. But for that, we are going to portion our resin out into 3 different cups here. I'm going to just tip this over and let this drain out so we can get as much of that as possible. So for this blue color that I'm trying to make, it's like a bluish green. I have this patina alcohol ink that is like a bluish green. And we're going to use some of this. And I'm actually going to put some white in it to try and make it a little bit more opaque. Alcohol inks are very transparent. Yeah, like the original one, it's very like, it just kind of, you drop it and it kind of just stops on whatever side you dropped it on. I really like the barrel D4 or the crystal D4 because I feel like it rolls really, really well. And like my biggest complaint with the caltrop D4 is just like how awkward it is to hold. And so I think a lot of people like the new shapes because they roll better and they're like easier to hold. But yeah, so I put some white in here because I want to make this kind of opaque. Alcohol ink is translucent unless you build it up or put like a white in here. And this is actually really close to the color of the original dye, so I'm hoping that this works out. And then I also just need some like white ink for this dirty pour, so we're gonna just put some drops of white into this cup here, and we'll mix this one up too. Okay, so we've got some white, we've got our blue, and then this last one, I'm gonna put a little bit of this gold mica powder into, and then we're gonna drip some gold alcohol ink in it. I'm gonna tap that off so I can use this popsicle stick again. So just a little bit of gold, and that's just gonna tint this with kind of like a gold sparkle. It's gonna be hard to see on camera, but it will be kind of gold glittery-esque. And then what we're gonna do is, I have this dirty pour cup. This is from Firebolt Dice. She like 3D printed and then molded these, and I purchased one. A few other makers have come out with similar designs as well. You can also just use a cup that you have and just carefully pour this in. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to fill each of the chambers up with one of our colored resins. So I'm going to put the blue on one side. I'm going to put the white on the other end. And then in the middle, I'm going to put this clear, and I'm going to put a couple drops of gold ink in. Because I want the gold ink to kind of be a little bit more vibrant, but I don't want all of it to be gold. I want some of it to be clear still. So I'm just going to drop this on the top, and as we pour, it'll kind of slightly mix in, similarly to what we did with the smoke wisps, but it'll just have a slightly different effect. So we'll just put a couple of the drops of gold in here, and then when you pour it, it'll pour all three of the colors kind of at once, and they'll start to mix together. So I'm gonna just kind of hold this up nice and tight, a little bit of a swirl, and then we'll just kind of do this until this is empty, and then we'll refill and we'll try it again. This is looking really similar to the original though, so I'm really hopeful that I got the right color combination. This is what I get for not writing down how I make certain dice. Pro tip, if you're gonna start making dice, either like record everything or write everything down, do something so that you don't end up with a beautiful design that everyone loves and you don't remember how you made it. I have like 8 different blue alcohol inks, and so I was like, well, it could be any combination of these 8 colorants that I have. Because I was pretty sure I didn't use a mica powder, but that still leaves a lot of options. Again, we're just filling up our cup and then pouring into our mold. With this, you want to give it a little bit of a swirly, like zigzaggy pattern from your wrist as you're pouring, just to kind of mix how those 3 colors are going into the mold, but you don't have to do too much. And then, like I said, you could also just do this with a regular cup, or any other pour cup that you use when you're making. I just got one of these to try it out, and it's been really fun to kind of experiment with and see like how it works and how it affects dirty pours. I've done a couple of other different styles of dirty pour, and this one is fun if you're using like more than two or 3 colors, because I think at that point it gets really hard to layer your dice properly or your colors properly in your pour cup. I've also done it where I just pour each color into one cup in layers, kind of like an acrylic paint pour, and put a little bit of white ink in between. That's been a really fun effect as well. But they create different effects, so it really just depends on what you are hoping to get from your dice. It looks like I might have ended up with a little too much blue and not enough of the other ones, so hopefully I can at least finish this set, and then we might do something a little different for the singles that we've got left. Oh, come on, we're so close. Okay. Yeah, so we have a lot of blue left. I'm just gonna pour the blue in here. We've got 2 D20s and a D2 left, so I'm just kind of gonna scrape whatever I can out of here into this pour cup, and we'll just kind of see what happens. Seems like I didn't do a great job portioning the resin out before I mix the colors, so we're just gonna make do. We'll just kind of scrape out this cup as much as we can. Yeah, we don't have a lot of this gold left, but that is okay. You can always just drop the gold ink on something else. We also don't have a lot of white left, so these are probably going to be mostly blue dice, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. They're just going to look a little bit different than the rest of the dice. So again, I'm just gonna scrape out whatever I can from this white cup, and we'll see what happens. Obviously, these are gonna look a little different because we don't have an even amount of resin in the pour cup anymore. but I think it'll be close enough that it'll be okay. Get the D2 or D20. Will we get the other D20? I have more blue in the regular cup, so if we don't, that's okay. Yeah, it looks like we're not quite. So I think what I'm gonna do is lose the camera again. Oh dear, apologies. We are doing the best with what we got today. There we go. So I have a little bit of blue left in here. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put a drop of white and then a drop of gold in here. So we'll still get all of the colors. It'll just pour a little bit differently as we try and finish off this last D20. Yeah. Okay, that seems good. That one will look a little bit different, but I think ultimately that'll be okay. So we are ready to finish these up. Just like the other ones, I'm gonna give it a little bit of time to degas. We'll pop the bubbles. We'll get the lids put on. So again, we're just kind of quickly hitting the tops of these to pop any micro bubbles that might be sitting on the surface. The more bubbles we can get out before we put these in the pressure pot, the more likely we are to not have giant holes in our dice. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna pop all these lids on, and then we'll start wrapping up the stream, because the last step is to just put these in the pressure pot, which is loud and involves me running the air compressor, and the construction outside is starting. So we're definitely just gonna start wrapping this up here. Again, thank you all for those of you that were hanging out. I know some of us were in the chat, some of y'all were just lurking, and I appreciate everyone who takes some time out of their day to hang out on the stream. We did not have any hiccups with the stream today, which I'm really excited about. Our new internet definitely seems to be working better than our old, so that does mean I will be resuming my Sims 4 stream with my Legacy Challenge, and I will also be starting up my Spyro 120% challenge again. So definitely keep a lookout for that. If you want updates on when I'll be doing those things, please give me a follow on Twitter, as well as just following here. If you're followed here, you get notifications of when I go live, and I'm also trying to start posting that on Twitter again so that people can see and can come and hang out. So if you're interested in variety streaming, definitely come hang out. It's been a good time. And again, if you're interested in seeing how these dice turn out, I will be posting some sneak peeks and some demolding videos over on my Instagram channel at sunflower.dice, which is also down in my Twitch about page. The last thing, I do have a Black Friday sale running now through the end of November. So if you're interested in getting some playable art for your gaming table, as well as jewelry, stickers, and other accessories, I have 20% off everything in my shop right now. I have over 80 listings of ready-to-ship items that make great gifts for yourself or for your friends, family, or loved ones, especially for the holiday season. And I would love to be a part of your gift giving this year. Thank you all so much for hanging out for the stream, and I will see you all next time. Bye, everyone.